that? Was it like 7 or something like that?
Yes.
Okay. Provision 7. Now listen. The main thing, page 193, provision 7. And basically what we were talking about is when you have earned your compensation. Now, as you're studying, remember the things that you're putting together. Is there something significant about an exclusive right to sell listing agreement? And think about Brad's question just a moment ago. It means something different from exclusive agency, correct? All right? When have you earned your compensation? Not necessarily when do you get paid. You have earned your compensation when you bring a ready, willing, and able buyer at the terms of the contract with no contingencies, or if the seller accepts a lesser offer, you have earned your compensation. When you typically get paid, you typically get paid at closing, but you earn your compensation way back here. And then it goes into detail on a lot of stuff that's not radically memorable. However, I did want you to see in your reading last night, a lot of times we think about a typical residential transaction. I bring a buyer or another agent brings a buyer to my listing. We ultimately go to close and we get paid at the closing table. That's the way we visualize it. But the words are more precise. Here's something that you probably didn't visualize that you were to pick up on in your reading tonight. What if I'm a listing agent and I'm dealing with tenants in common, 3 tenants in common have a property to sell, okay? I bring them a buyer and it's a $300,000 property. And 2 of the tenants in common say, you know what, I'm not going to accept this offer because it's only $270. One of the tenants in common said, you know what, I'd sell my share for $90, all right? As a listing agent, are you entitled to be compensated for selling that property if one of the tenants in common decides to sell their 1/3 share? Well, you didn't sell the whole thing, so you're not entitled to compensation on the whole thing, but what might you be? Yeah. I think you deserve to be compensated for the 1/3 that you sold, okay? Does that happen on a regular basis? Not really, but I think you're entitled to be compensated for that. Selling a part of a business interest, for example. Okay, and how about this situation? This would be a great day in your life. This never happens. But remember, we have to set up things for test questions in a way that they make sense to you. We're testing a particular thing, etc., etc. So how about this? This would be a great day. You have a listing in North Raleigh for $450,000. Okay? Nice listing, North Raleigh. Simultaneously, you receive a listing at Carr Lake, overlooking the lake. Right around $450,000 as well, okay? As you're talking to your seller in North Raleigh, he said, man, I'd love to have a lake house. And when you're talking to your seller at the lake, he said, I need a place in North Raleigh because I'm working over an RTP and I need to be closer to work. Boy, this is kismet right here, okay? They are both your listings. These 2 parties decide to get together and literally exchange. Very little cash changes hands. Only the difference between the 2 properties. That's the only cash that changes hands. Have you earned any compensation on those?
Yes.
What's your compensation? How much are you going to get paid on the house at Carr Lake? Whatever your listing percentage was, what are you going to get paid on the house in Raleigh? Whatever your listing percentage is, there's only $50,000 that changed hands because of the difference, but you're entitled to be compensated for $450 and $400 at whatever your listing was. Even if it's an exchange, you're entitled to be compensated. Does that make sense to you? Well, I mean, obviously it's rare that that would happen. But the point is, you're entitled to be compensated not just for selling the house, but for selling portions of a property or for exchanges, trades, etc., etc. Feel okay about that? What's that? Yeah, clearly the way I described it, it would have been dual agency all around. Okay? Dual agency all around in that case. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. After we talk about the compensation paragraph, let's see what comes up next. I'm over on page 194. Continue going. Cooperation with other agents. Now, what does everybody see where I am? Cooperation with other agents. We'll fly through some of this stuff. Here's what you're telling the seller. Seller, when I take your listing, I'm going to put it into the multiple listing service, and other agents are going to bring the buyers. But be prepared, seller. Just because there's another agent in this house, does that agent necessarily work for the seller?
No.
He probably does not. Matter of fact, I'm going to tell the seller, you need to assume I am your agent. Anybody else coming in, you probably need to assume that they work for the buyer. In other words, I don't know why, but sometimes sellers want to stick around the house when property is being shown, that is a bad, bad idea. They need to be out of the house and make it available. It's not helping anyone for them to be there. A lot of sellers think it will. Well, I know more about the house, or I know my negotiating position, blah, blah, blah. You're gonna screw it up, okay? Get out of the house. And if you see somebody else in this house, you need to assume that they're the enemy, okay? Don't talk to them. You might accidentally slip up and give them information. We cooperate with other agents, and some of them have bad intentions in mind. They work for the other party. Yeah.
In the field, what about when inspectors come? Like, do you need to be out of the house while the inspection's going on?
I highly recommend that the sellers always be out of the house unless I have specifically requested them to be there. Now, when inspectors are there, the buyer's agent should be there, okay? But
Okay.
not necessarily the seller or the listing agent, okay?
Okay.
But anyway, cooperation, and what we tell in those paragraphs is how much we're going to pay the buyer's agent. And a lot of times the seller, not a lot of times, I mean, it's not that often, but the seller could look at you and say, wait a minute, let me get this straight. I'm paying the buyer's agent? No, you're not paying the buyer's agent. I'm paying the buyer's agent. You're paying me 6%. I'm going to split my 6% and give half of it to the buyer's agent. We actually tell them in that paragraph right there, okay? Firm's duties, it's interesting when you read the firm's duties, you actually, a lot of times we spend time talking about what we are not. As a listing agent, I am not the following things. I am not an inspector. I am not an appraiser. I am not a attorney. I'm not an accountant, okay? A lot of times we talk about what we are not. And interestingly enough, what's the name of this form? The exclusive right to sell listing agreement. We never say in this form that we will sell this house. Why don't we say that we will sell the house?
Because you let your.
First of all, there's no guarantee, but secondly, it's not my house. I can't sell the house, okay? You could sell the house. What we do is we use our expertise to bring buyers. That's what our duties are, and we will give you advice accordingly. But later in this contract, we'll spell out what their duties are as well. It's a contract. Both parties should have rights and obligations. Notice the paragraph. I want you to look at the paragraph that's down below the firm's duties. It's in all caps. It's bold printed. And if you look closely at it, I expect it goes into protected classes. Now, as we exercise our duties here, we will not do it in regard to, I can't read them, but I know what it says. Familial status, religion, sex, handicap, color, race, national origin. All of these are listed in there. This is fair housing language, but here comes the big question to you guys. Why is that in there? Why is this in the listing agreement? All good answers, not the right answer, but all good answers. What's that? Close. It's a rule. It's not technically the law. It's a real estate commission rule, right? Remember I described the real estate commission rule to you on Monday, and I said all agency agreements have to be in writing. They must have a start date and an end date. They cannot be automatically renewable, and they must have standard what? Non-discrimination language, okay? That's why it's in there. All the answers you gave were good, but that's what I was looking for, okay? As we go below that, marketing. In this class, I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about marketing. Obviously, in the field, you'll get trained on this. You'll know what tools that you have available. But here's what's important about marketing from our standpoint. You actually have to have permission for everything that you do. You want to put a sign in the yard? Bam, there's a box there that the seller has to check to give you permission. Do you realize that some sellers might not want to have a sign in the yard? Yeah. Some of them might want to be secretive. Some of them might be HOA issues. If it's a condo, they don't actually have the right to put it out in the common areas and things like that. So you have to have permission to do all these things. You want to do an open house? You got to have permission. You want to put it in the MLS? You got to have permission. Now, most of the time, they will give you permission for this because they want exposure. But all these marketing things that you see, you actually have to have permission to do them. Okay. Continuing on. We get to like boxes. It says like boxes. This is basically just asking their permission. So you understand the like box concept. I'm going to put it on there, and I believe it to be safe. However, I cannot guarantee it's safe. Someone could come and cut that like box open, and I don't know. I'm watching Longmire now, so somebody could come and just shoot it open with a rifle, and then get the key out and open the door. I hope you don't have that kind of neighborhood. But having said that, it's a possibility. I can't guarantee you that people are not going to access this. I tell you what I'll do. I will use my best efforts to make sure that it's safeguarded. But I'll put the light box on your house. Someone could get in through that. Yes?
In terms of, I know that you already said previously that you don't like DocuSign, and when a document's just sending.
That was a personal comment. yeah.
I was just thinking, when someone is sent DocuSign, these boxes, are they just checked off for you? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times, and I don't want to get into too long a conversation about it, but you understand it's going to happen one of two ways. One is the agent's going to pre-check them,
Yeah.
which means the seller's never even going to look at them. Or the agent's going to leave them fillable, in which case the seller's never going to fill them.
Yeah.
And so you end up in that tough situation there. I bet you in most cases that the agent sends them pre-checked and they just tell the seller to read over this, okay? And that's why I don't love DocuSign, because they're not sitting down and having this explanation with them.
Yeah.
Now, think about this, and I don't think it's a problem, to be honest with you. Think about this. The MLS today, what happens when you go out? Clearly you understand this. Good pictures sell houses. Good pictures sell houses. Why is that the case? Where does everybody start their search? Now I'm talking about everybody. I'm talking about like 93+% start online. And how many websites are there that proliferate this information? Millions. Millions. I mean, a lot of people grab this data and put it on their websites, and that's okay. It's certainly legal in most cases to do. When you're taking pictures of a house, I would ask you to be cognizant of the following things. Do not take a picture of their priceless Van Gogh over the fireplace and put it out there so that a gazillion people can see it. Don't take pictures of their lovely kids on the wall and post it out there where a gazillion people can see it, okay? Use a little bit of common sense and common courtesy when you're doing this. So when we're asking people about the proliferation of this information, there literally may be some people that do not want certain things. Some people don't want open houses. If you're selling $1.5 million house, I don't know that they want everybody just coming in with their dirty feet on their nice white carpet, okay? If you're selling a house that has expensive stuff in it, they might want you to really, really safeguard their information, and that's fair. It's their property. That's why it's a little bit, but rarely controversial. Okay, good question, good question. Continuing on, let's get to earnest money. Earnest money is actually going to be interesting. I have two thoughts in regards to earnest money. You're going to read the first two lines in the earnest money paragraph, and let me tell you what those two lines say. The first line roughly says this: if there is earnest money, it will go in the firm's trust account. The word firm is capitalized, meaning the listing firm, right? Now, let me mention this to you. I don't know that you even get this question anymore, but we used to ask questions like this on the exam. Where will the earnest money most likely be? And if that is the question, the answer is the listing firm's trust account. Now let me break that question down for you and let me tell you why it's an issue. The question, where will it most likely be? I mean, it doesn't have to go into the listing firm's trust account. We say that that's where we're most likely going to put it in this paragraph right here. But today, a lot of firms do not have trust accounts. And the reason they don't is because you can't be liable for a trust account issue if you don't have a trust account, if you never handle trust monies, okay? So a lot of people allow the attorneys to do it today. But it doesn't change the fact, if you get a question that says, where is it most likely going to be, the answer is going to be in the listing firm's trust account, not the listing agent's trust account, because the listing agent likely doesn't have a trust account. The firm does, okay? Do you understand where I'm going with that? As things are evolving, not as many people hold it, but our contract says that's where we're going to put it unless we tell you upfront, okay? The second line in that paragraph basically says this: now that the earnest money is in my trust account, I'm the listing agent. Let me set this up for you. I'm the listing agent. We have $5,000 in the trust account. And one of the things, I'll go ahead and foreshadow for you, one of the things that earnest money is for the seller in the event of a breach by the buyer. Does that make sense? Later you'll learn that the damages are liquidated at the earnest money. Okay, so here's the deal. The buyer ends up, after due diligence, getting a job in California. He's going to be making crazy money. So he says, you know what? I'm breaching the contract, keep $5,000. Okay? So now you have money forfeited by the buyer because he breached the contract, right? Where's that money sitting? In the trust account. Okay. So let me ask you this question. Whose money does that become? Once the buyer breaches, whose money does that become? the seller's, according to the contract, it'll become the seller's money. You'll see that a little bit later today. Okay? So $5,000 seller said, I didn't sell the house, but at least I get $5,000. Well, if you read that second sentence, here's what you're going to learn. Actually, Mr. Seller, you'll get half. You'll get half of that $5,000. Who's going to get the other half? The listing agent, the listing firm. Technically, okay? Why? Because if you read that second line, it says, in the event of a breach by the buyer, the earnest money will be divided equally between the firm and the seller. Okay? So earnest money, where is it? Listing firm's trust account, unless we tell you otherwise. What's going to happen in the event of a breach by the buyer? The listing agent is entitled to how much? Half. And by the way, when we say entitled to half, this assumes that it's not greater than what you would have earned in compensation anyway. Okay? But rarely is that going to be the case. Now that I've got your attention, let's try this question for you. What do you think? If you were the seller and your deal just fell through, and you're like, man, my house has been on the market for 30 or 45 days, the deal falls through, at least I get $5,000. That'll help me make a mortgage payment or two, and we'll remarket the property. And the agent comes to you and they basically say, well, actually I get half of that. What would you say if you were the seller?
What the heck, why?
What the heck? That's exactly what I would say. What the heck? It's my house that was off the market. Why do you get half of it? Now, you can explain this to them if you want to. You could explain to them it's in the contract. Okay? It was in the contract. You signed a contract that said I get half. I've done my work. I'm entitled to half. What if the seller gets belligerent on this and says, I want my money? What's your firm going to do if the seller says, I want my money? What are you going to do?
If you want to keep this in the file.
You're going to give it back. In the event that there is a dispute between the seller and the broker over money forfeited by the buyer's breach, you're going to give it back to the seller. Do you know why you're going to give it back to the seller? And I'm not talking about just for PR purposes. Obviously for PR purposes, that makes sense. But why are you obligated to give the money back to the seller? Whose money is it? Whose money is it? It's the seller's money. If it was in that trust account, it's money belonging to others, not the firm. So what happens is when the buyer breached, it became the seller's money. If the seller demands it, you have to give it to them. Okay? Now, if you want to, you can sue them because you're entitled to that compensation as a matter of what? Contract. And what do you do if someone doesn't pay you in the contract? You sue them for the money. Now, notice what I said, Evan. I said you could. Are you going to? You're probably not, because you still have a house to sell, right? And here's what I have found. If you sue someone, they're actually less likely to list with you. Okay, so I know what most firms are going to do. They're going to roll over, give them their money back, and live to fight another day and sell the house and get paid the commission on that. But remember, that's not what we test you on. What we test you on is the specificity here. The money is in the listing firm's trust account. That's the answer if it comes up. We're entitled to half of it if that comes up. However, if there's a dispute between the broker and between the firm and the seller, in this case, you got to give them the money. You can sue them if you want to. It's not going to happen. Okay? Earnest money. Watch today how many times I talk to you about what's going to happen to earnest money in the event certain things happen. Okay? Very, very important for test purposes. Let's move on a little bit farther. And then we get to seller representations. What's that person going to say right there? Oh, are you in a flood zone? Do you have synthetic stucco? I don't want to talk about synthetic stucco, but I'm going to anyway. It actually does not show up on our syllabus anymore as synthetic stucco. It used to be on the syllabus. I'm going to talk about it, but I'm going to do it very briefly, and I'm going to do it very specifically. Here's the specific part. So the existence of synthetic stucco is always a material fact. If a house, listen to this, if a house has or ever had synthetic stucco, that is a material fact that the agent must disclose. Synthetic stucco, the existence now or in the past, is always a material fact to a real estate agent. Now, I want to tell you the backstory of synthetic stucco, but I don't even know that you're going to find it to be that important for test purposes. If you ever see on the exam EIFS, you'll hear it sometimes referred to as EIFS. EIFS, they're talking about synthetic stucco. So here comes this story, no notes necessary, all right? Stucco is a really good looking product. If you've ever seen stucco, it looks like a brushed concrete, okay? You see it as an exterior on houses. A lot of times you see it on higher-end houses. You see it in resort properties. If you go to a landfall at Whitesville Beach, you see a significant amount of actual stucco. And like a lot of things, if it's a nice product, a good look, wouldn't it be great if we could take that look and bring it down to the masses so that it's more affordable? And that's where synthetic stucco comes in. Synthetic stucco was designed to look like actual stucco, but it was made of a plastic polymer. Well, here's the interesting thing about these plastic polymers. They are impervious to water. They're impervious to rain. Okay? Is that good or bad? Well, it's good if you keep the water out. It's bad if the water gets behind the walls. And so what was happening with synthetic stucco is, as it was installed, there were crevices and cracks around windows and things like that, so water can blow in and get behind the synthetic stucco, and now it can't get out. So if you have plastic, water, and wood, wood is going to lose, all right? These houses were literally almost rotting from the outside in, or inside out, however you want to say it. So there's a major class action lawsuit in the mid-90s involving synthetic stucco. The manufacturers say it's a great product, it was just installed incorrectly. So who are they trying to shift the burden to? The installers, the contractors, right. The reason they say it's a good product is if it installed correctly, it would have weep holes, so that water would weep out, and that, therefore it's not stuck. The installers say it's a crappy product, it never should have been created. Don't put this burden on us, they're trying to shift it back to the manufacturer, okay? Real Estate Commission takes a look at this and says, look, the real estate agents didn't have anything to do with this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to disclose. If there's synthetic stucco now, or if there ever was at any point in the past, agents, you just disclose it. We'll let the other people figure out who's responsible for all of that. But notice what I said. It's easy to determine whether a house today has synthetic stucco. Because here's what you can do. You can look at it, and if it looks like stucco, what you can do is go up and bang your fingers on it. If it sounds like plastic, it's synthetic stucco because it's plastic and it basically has a styrofoam base behind it. I'm sure it's more technical than that, but that's what it sounds like. If you bang on it and your fingers bleed, then it's real stucco because you have just pounded on concrete, okay? So it's easy to tell if it has it now. But remember, in the class action lawsuit, a lot of this was replaced. A lot of the siding was replaced. So how would you know if a house ever had synthetic stucco? What are we doing right here in the listing agreement? We're asking the seller. Seller, do you know whether you ever had synthetic stucco? They may or may not know. Remember, the lawsuit's in the mid-90s. So it's very possible. We're 20 years removed from that. Some of them might not know. You can look at old tax records. You can look at the preponderance of the evidence. If all the houses have synthetic stucco, but yours just magically has more recent cedar shakes, you know, there's enough suspicion right there. Look at old MLS listings. Our MLS goes back to at least 7 years, in some cases longer. At some point, it's not going to be obvious whether a house has synthetic stucco or not. So as an agent, remember what you're responsible for, what you know, or what you reasonably should know. At some point, it may no longer be reasonable. But if you reasonably know that this property had synthetic stucco, what are you going to do as an agent? You're going to disclose it. You have no choice because it's material fact. That's why we're asking specifically about synthetic stucco. It's one of the few things we talk about in this class that is a mandatory disclosure. Okay? I would ask for questions or comments on that. I don't really want them, though. I mean, so it's not going to be that high level. I'm more concerned about you understanding from a material standpoint. Okay? Let's see. Termite bond, do you have it? Ownership. You know, some of these questions are just asked and answered. If you ever want me to explain to you why, look at that weird question that we asked the seller about ownership. How long have you owned the property? Over a year, which would be the case most of the time when they're selling. Most of the time it's over a year. Less than a year, maybe somebody bought a house and then had a job transfer or something like that. Maybe it's a flipper, I don't know. Look what that third question is. Does not even own the property yet. does not even own the property yet. Say it again? The question is, how can you sell it if you don't own it? Maybe they contracted on a property to buy it, and they actually put it on the market to market the property before they ever take possession of the property. That's a perfectly legal thing to do. Frowned upon by the real estate commission, but it's not an illegal thing to do. Also, there might be companies out there that are like relocation companies, which they are selling it because they, IBM has a company that handles their relocations, and one of the deals they have is, if we require you to move, then we will take care of the sale of your house. So third-party remarketing companies might not actually own the property that they're marketing, okay? There's usually a logical explanation of why this is taking place. And if you know about it, agent, you can research it and determine whether it would affect your buyer's ability to acquire title. Okay, that's the only reason it's important. Yeah.
Would you be able, the first thing I thought of is if you're inheriting something, like let's say your father left you a house in his will, but it's in probate courts, if you know you're gonna get it, can you list it?
I think you could. I think you would have an interest in that property. You know that you're going to get it. You're confident of this. Yeah.
It would depend, I guess, if it's in a will, how long the probate courts would.
Yeah, I think you could start marketing the property. Having said that, I mean, there's a material issue yet. I don't have possession of the property yet. So, you're putting everybody on notice. The buyer don't spend a lot of money on this until you're confident you can acquire title.
Okay.
But yeah, I think you have a future interest in that property. You can market your future interest. Okay. But anyway, it's kind of a weird question. Most of the time, the answer is going to be number one. There's actually another reason. This is not testable, but in the field, do y'all remember coming out of 2008 when we had the meltdown? A lot of the meltdown was based on fraud. People were getting loans, people were flipping and flopping properties and stuff like that. And one of the things that was happening was people were flipping contracts, and a lot of fraud was based on that. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac started making rules. Now these are the secondary market, which we haven't talked about yet, but basically they provide the liquidity for the primary market. What was happening was they were putting underwriting requirements that said, unless the seller has held the property for at least 6 months, they would not underwrite a loan for a buyer. And so what would happen in some of these cases where the seller had not owned the property for a period of time, they were concerned about loan fraud, right? The markets were concerned about loan fraud. So Fannie and Freddie would not underwrite a loan. And a lot of times the seller would say, well, what do I care? I paid cash for it anyway. Well, it's not you. It's not you, seller. It's the buyer. It's the loan that the buyer is going to get to buy the property. We had one situation where an agent contracted on a house 3 months after the seller had acquired it, and their lender said, well, sorry, we will not fund this loan until the seller has held it for at least 6 months. So what they did in that case is they ended up just delaying closing until the 6 months had expired. That buyer ended up owning the property. Had the seller been a little more desperate, what he might have done was gone out and looked for a cash buyer to do it. But what the seller knew is if he allowed someone to borrow money to buy his house, he could probably sell it for a higher price. So he decided to wait 3 months and sell it that way. Underwriting requirements, much more important in the field than for test purposes. Okay? Yes, Ann?
So you kind of just answered my question, but it says under ownership has owned for at least 1 year, so that you were talking about 6 months, but why does it say seller represents that the seller has owned the property for at least 1 year?
Well, remember, if they've owned it for at least...
For less or for at least...
Yeah, notice the other two, for less than a year or has not yet acquired title yet. Okay? Much more important in the field. Okay, then we go down to receipt of sample forms. Go ahead and give the seller these forms. These are long forms. I mean, the offer purchase contract now is about 11 pages or 10 pages of actual important information. Give them the forms. Let them read these forms. They're going to be looking at them, and a lot of times they're going to make decisions hastily. Go ahead and give them the forms up front so they can start studying them. Notice then we start asking them about what their loan amount. How much do you owe, Mr. Seller? Is that going to be important information? Yeah. I was talking to a student the other day, and I apologize. Sometimes I don't realize that you have no basis of information sometimes in real estate, and I take things for granted. And as I was talking to a student the other day, he said, I'm thinking about selling my house, but I owe some money on the house, and I don't have enough money to pay it off, and blah, blah, blah. How's this going to work? And I looked at him and I said, well, God, that's a strange question. And it dawned on me, he just doesn't understand what happens at a closing, okay? seller owes $150,000, but he's going to sell it for $250,000. This is not a problem. This is not a problem. When the buyer buys the property, $250,000 is going to come into the attorney's trust account. The attorney's going to take that money out of the trust account. They're going to pay off that $150,000 note so that there are no encumbrances on the property. So the seller's bank got paid off. The buyer's bank is going to have a deed of trust collateral on the property. All of this takes place seamlessly. That's what we hire attorneys, paralegals, legal assistants for, okay? So that's what's going on. The reason we're asking them about their loans right now is, what if you're going to sell the house for $250,000 and he owes $275,000? That would be good information to know now rather than later, because the question becomes, is he going to be able to convey title? Or is this going to be a short sale, which brings up a whole different set of scenarios. We will talk about short sales in chapter 14 and 15. It'll come up when we talk about finance, okay? But let me tell you something, that's important. I have had agents before, oh man, I've known these people for years, they've got a lot of equity in it. You don't know people that well, okay? These are fair questions to ask. Do you remember talking about material facts earlier? We talked about one of the material facts is the ability of a principal in a transaction to complete the transaction. You have to be prepared to ask the hard questions. Will you give me a copy of your last mortgage statement? Why do I have to do that? Well, what I want to do is figure out what your net is going to be, Mr. and Ms. Seller. Okay, how much you're going to walk away. As long as it's a positive figure, I don't really care what it is, as long as it's a positive figure. Okay, so if we start looking at negative, matter of fact, you know what the worst thing about them being upside down is? How are you going to get paid? Okay. That's not the most important thing. But it's important. Ask these questions. Get this information. It is absolutely, completely legitimate if people are involved. Buyers need to be qualified. Sellers need to be qualified as well. This is where we're asking them this. If you look down below that, we're also asking the seller a litany of questions where we talk about things like this. Hey seller, do you have any UCC filings on the property? Do you remember UCC? Finance fixtures, okay? Are there any mechanics liens which have not yet been recorded? I need to know stuff like that so I can calculate how much you're going to walk away from. Seller, have you, over on the next page, seller, have you considered bankruptcy? Because remember, in this class, bankruptcy roughly has the effect that it terminates contracts that you're under, right? Gosh, I'd hate to spend a lot of time and money listing a property and then they declare bankruptcy and it throws it into a whole different ballpark at that point. So we're asking these questions. These are legitimate questions an agent should know. Are there any leases on the property? And again, it shocks me how many agents that I talk to that don't know this. If you have leased the property for 12 months and a buyer wants to buy that property, they're buying it subject to that lease. I have literally had buyers ask me before, well, how much notice do I have to give them before I kick them out? You can't kick them out if they have 9 months left on that lease. You can't evict them. Well, what do you mean? I didn't sign that lease. No, but you're buying it just like any other encumbrance. Any other encumbrance. A lease acts that way. FHA appraisal, I don't think this is testable. Let me hit it real quickly for efficiency's sake. FHA appraisals will stick to a property for a period of time. This again is part of the product of the meltdown in 2008. So many FHA appraisals being done. As the market improved, there were a lot of properties that didn't appraise. Here's what I mean by that.